Time for a street fight. Today's bull, Ryan Sweet. He's the senior economist at Moody's, and our bear is former bank regulator William Black. Ryan, this number looks really bad. What are we missing? Where is the bullish side to this?
Well, I would prefer to say we're cautiously optimistic. I think 80,000 jobs is definitely a disappointment. Our forecast for 125,000 jobs would still be a disappointment. This is a very, very tough job market, but I think the 80,000 jobs added in June is a little bit misleading because a lot of the weakness was focused in just a handful of industries, primarily education and healthcare, which typically adds 30,000 jobs during this recovery, only added 2,000. That's not sustainable. We're going to see a rebound there. Retail was weak. Primarily department stores. I still think there may be a little bit of some weather-related payback, but also leading indicators, some of the key things that we were looking at, temp help improved. So I think we're likely going to see a little bit of better job numbers lying ahead.
All right. William Black, who, by the way, was one of the best bank regulators of all time, according to my friend Paul Muller, who's written about the S&L crisis. So he knows what he's talking about. We're going to ask you some questions about JP Morgan at the end. But first, let's talk about the economy. You think that not only is it not just muddling through, but we may be headed for a recession. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that there are three serious risks of a recession. And Moody's, by the way, in December of last year said that we're going to have fiscal headwinds because the stimulus has run off. So that's one problem. The second problem is the lead-in story you just had. Europe is terrible, and Europe finds no way to get out of its problems. So it is dragging down the United States, and it goes from imminent crisis to imminent crisis. And the third is the fiscal cliff that we're all facing in December of this year, and that the markets are already beginning to anticipate. This is austerity on ultra steroids, and as with Europe, it would send the United States hurtling back into a great recession.
Ryan, scratch back here, if you will, or use your bullish hooves, or at least you say cautiously optimistic moves, to say what will keep us from falling off that fiscal cliff, and perhaps from a market standpoint. Europe we cannot control. It's not our show. Nonetheless, Wall Street, we know, has in the past climbed the wall of worry. Will we see that again? Will we just see these markets kind of grind higher?
Well, I think we're going to continue to improve in fits and starts. I agree Europe is a major headwind. The fiscal cliff is arguably the biggest concern that we have. The closer that we get towards the end of the year, I think more uncertainty is going to build about how we avoid falling off the fiscal cliff. But right now, there's few signs of a recession. I think we're just muddling along. I think it's a very sluggish recovery. If you look since the beginning of this year, average monthly job growth is about 150,000, which is identical to what we saw last year. So it is pretty much a blah labor market. Until we get some of these uncertainties resolved, I think we're going to continue to just grind gradually higher. And I think we're in a sluggish recovery, but I don't think we're headed for another downturn.
All right. Well, William, I agree with you that the last thing we need right now is austerity. What we need is growth. I disagree with you about the way you get there. You think we need more government stimulus. I would say we need more private sector growth and perhaps even less government than we now have. But make your case.
Well, the two things are consistent, right? Right now what we have is an $11 trillion loss of household wealth. And that means that demand has been tremendously harmed, and that means that business wasn't hiring. And so much of the hiring that's occurred in the private sector is because of government stimulus. After all, most of the money in the government stimulus goes to the private sector. That's where we buy the supplies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but hold on a second. A lot of that money was wasted, as you know. I mean, whenever the Wall Street Journal went in and looked at those so-called stimulus jobs, they found out that they weren't there. The government was way over-reporting the job creation effect of its stimulus.
No, look at the overall numbers of the recovery and look at it in comparison to Europe, where we ran a real-world test, all right? They went through austerity. We went through a mild stimulus package, and the results are in. And the United States economy, and this is where we agree with Moody's, is in a weak but real recovery that lasted for about 2 years. But that recovery is in severe danger of being completely derailed by the three factors that I've talked about. And as I listened, I heard agreement with, not disagreement.
I want to get in, Ryan, here for one quick second, but quickly I have to ask you about specifically, William, the JP Morgan situation now being part of the investigation of LIBOR, not to mention all of the other banks. Where do you stand on banks' involvement in manipulating interest rates? Do you think it is more widespread than just Barclays, who was fined already?
Oh, we know it is. In fact, Barclays reported to the City of London authorities that it was widespread and alleged that Barclays was one of the less dishonest entities. So, yes, this, too, has not been calculated in at all. This is by 2 orders of magnitude the largest antitrust violation in the history of the world that we've ever learned about. And the liability is going to be extraordinary, and much of it's going to be brought about through suits in the United States.
By the way, let me just emphasize, William, for those who don't know, you were a key regulator with the whole S&L crisis began, but one of the people who you know very well is Tim Geithner, because you focused in on Tim Geithner when he was head of the New York Fed, and that's when apparently in the year 2007 some of this LIBOR manipulation was going on. Will his actions be called into question?
Well, Geithner, we already know, was an abject failure as a regulator, and you're quite right. What Barclays did intelligently was try to settle early with the banking authorities, who are very weak in both countries. But now it's going to get into the Serious Fraud Office in the United Kingdom, has announced an investigation. The state AGs, who have been far more aggressive, attorney generals in the United States, are going to have claim on behalf of every state pension fund is going to be a victim of this. And as a result, there's going to be, given the much broader U.S. discovery than is allowed in the kingdom, far more of these embarrassing things comes out. And you know that it's already a political scandal in the United Kingdom about the role of the regulators facilitating the fraud.
Right. By the way, again, we wanted to focus on William's expertise with regard to the banking issue as well. So, Ryan, we didn't mean to give you short shrift there, but we're going to have you back to talk more of your bullishness coming up. We want to thank you both, former bank regulator William Black and Moody.